Welcome to the Viking Age podcast. It's the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. My name is Chris Schad. I'm a writer for the Viking Age Zone coverage and Bring Me the News as well as the Brookings Register. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you rate, comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. Today's guest is the founder of Vikings Corner, but you may know him more for his work at gophersguru.com. His name is Daniel House. What's going on, Daniel? You got some mock draft fatigue yet, or how are we feeling with 3 weeks to go until the draft?
I'm not quite at mock draft fatigue. I actually find those pretty interesting because you can find where the great spots in the draft are, where the depth kind of falls off. You know, you do those simulations, it kind of shows you where the ebbs and flows of the draft are, I guess.
Yeah, and with 3 weeks to go, the speculation is only going to increase. We're going to see some crazier stuff. Like I feel like it comes in waves. Like everybody has that first mock draft after the Super Bowl, just kind of kick off the season. Then they go to the combine, they get a little more information there, maybe a little pro days. Then they watch a little tape, they get a little batty maybe or something. They're like, hey, maybe somebody didn't go to this guy's birthday party or something. And then we just get the last wave, the last 2 weeks where it's like, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing this. It's smoke screen season.
Yeah, a lot of these teams have the smoke machines out and they are activating them heavy. So it's a lot of times when you don't hear something, it generally might be leading you toward that specific person because, hey, they're trying to leak out all the narratives to benefit themselves, these teams. I think the LA Chargers are definitely one of the teams doing that because they'd love to have 4 quarterbacks go right in front of them and end up with a ton of options at pick 5.
And of course, there's my conspiracy theory that they will take JJ McCarthy's fees there at pick number 5. But that's for later in the show. Right now, all the smoke is trending towards the Vikings trading up potentially into that top 5 to take a quarterback. A lot of people don't really know what's going on, but it seems like in the last couple of days, there's been some whispers, maybe some rumblings about what if the Vikings can't trade up? And the Athletics' Alec Lewis filled in for Paul Allen on KFAN the other day, and he said that the possibility of the Vikings not trading up for a quarterback is more probable than the fans want to think. On Tuesday, Score North's Darren Wolfson jumped on, and he said, I don't think it's incredibly far-fetched that the Vikings can't move up. So let's say this, like we've looked at this as kind of a doomsday scenario the last couple of weeks. Let's say the Vikings can't move up. Who is your favorite target for them at pick 11, assuming the top 4 quarterbacks would be off the board?
I'd say Byron Murphy from Texas would be an outstanding option, especially when you look at where they need to go defensively. Some of the things they weren't able to do during free agency, you know, they were in on Christian Wilkins, it sounded like, but just couldn't agree and get that money where it needed to be. So I think defensive tackle is a priority. You need to have a disruptive player inside on the defensive line to complement some of the other moves that they made in free agency. But you look at Byron Murphy, he's just so disruptive. He plays with great balance and he can activate his hips and hands and generate a lot of knockback. He moves really well, has a quick first step, excellent lateral quickness. You blink and he's crossing past a blocker to shoot a gap. And you see him being able to stack and shed blocks, but maintain balance through traffic, which I think is something that's very important. A lot of different pass rush moves within his arsenal too. Rip, club, bull rush, swim, cross chop. You got the spin. I mean, just a lot of different things that he can bring to your defense. And I think that's something that the Vikings want to prioritize looking at this group. I think if you want to get an elite defensive tackle, you're going to have to do it early on in this draft. I think there are some developmental options that you could potentially target on day 2, but Byron Murphy would certainly be a blue chip option.
I think when you think about the defensive tackle, like it's been a long time since the Vikings have had, pardon my French here, but this has been the term I've been using, a badass shit wrecker in the trenches where, you see Kenny Clark, right? When the Packers play the Vikings, Kenny Clark is like tossing Garrett Bradbury aside because he's a big, physical, strong, athletic freak. The Vikings haven't had one of those since Linval Joseph was running around. We've had some guys since then. Shamar Stefan, Andre Patterson, he pointed right in the camera and said, Shamar Stefan's the real deal. You fans stop picking on him. And basically all he did was like absorb tackles. One of my favorite stats that I looked up was Byron Murphy had more pressures at Texas last season than all the Vikings interior defensive linemen combined. He also had the highest pass rush win rate, according to Pro Football Focus, in the nation last season. And he's excuse me, I'm trying to like sort out my thoughts here. I'm just so excited about Byron Murphy. His relative athletic score was 9 point. It was above 9. I think it was like 9.08 or something. So like the guys, he's big, he's physical. He's not as big as some of the guys, but they need pass rushers on the interior to get to the quarterback. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses of Brian Flores' defense right now.
Yeah, and you just look at how good teams are constructed. You got to be able to generate pocket push. I'm like the captain of interior defensive line play. I believe it's something that's extremely important when you're roster building. You got to be able to prevent quarterbacks from having clean vision lanes. If you're able to get some knockback, then they don't have clean pockets to throw into. You totally affect the ability of the quarterback to have a great launch angle from the pocket. So if you can get someone like Byron Murphy, who's not only an adequate pass rusher, but people don't talk enough about his ability against the run as well. So, Kevin O'Connell mentioned it at the league meetings about needing to get that snap count down for Harrison Phillips too. I mean, you could kind of see that as the season went on. I thought he played really well for the first half of the year and then sort of tapered off as the season progressed. So I think developing some consistent contributors at the defensive tackle position. I think they need one blue chip player, and then they'll continue to work with a guy like Jaquelin Roy, who, obviously has some flashes of potential within his game too. Now another year off season with Brian Flores, we'll see where he's at.
It is funny you mentioned Harrison Phillips because at the end of the year, I think what a lot of people remember is like them almost needing a wheelbarrow to get him on and off the field because he was so banged up because that snap count was so high. Another idea that could be floated around if they keep that 11th overall pick is an edge rusher. I know they signed Jonathan Grenard. I know they signed Blake Cashman, a guy that you're familiar with, a former Gopher, and Andrew Van Ginkel. But could they take another edge rusher and just go with a strength in numbers type thing on the edge next season?
I could see that potentially, but I do think that you look at how the roster's constructed with the idea that Andrew Van Ginkel is so versatile that you're going to get him into a lot of sub-package designs with the pass rush, being able to play off the edge as an off-ball guy, the stunt game, the blitz game, all the different things that he can do. Plus, Jonathan Grenard being a very impactful pass rusher who had a very good pressure rate last year, was able to generate pass rush wins. I think, now that the challenge is going to be him becoming Batman instead of being Robin in Houston. Now it's going to be a little bit more about, him being able to consistently win matchups while getting a lot of the attention schematically. That's why I think getting another defensive tackle in here would be very good for matchups along the line of scrimmage. So I guess it kind of depends on how the draft shakes out, what's available at 11, how the quarterback situation plays out. I would lean more toward defensive tackle being the pick, especially based on the trends of that position and what's available as you progress later into the draft. However, I do think Brian Flores is very good at taking unheralded talent at defensive tackle and maximizing it. So, yeah, it comes down to kind of what the flow of the draft looks like. They could possibly go edge rusher, a guy like Jared Verse, maybe. Chop Robinson is a twitchy pass rusher. Holy cow, that guy is explosive. His first step, I think, is the best overall in this draft class. So there are options out there.
I'm trying to think of the third guy. There's Jared Verse, Dallas Turner. What do you think about Dallas? You think he goes top 10 or what? Where do you think he goes?
Dallas Turner is more of a pocket pushing type of bull rushing defensive end edge rusher. That forklift like lever just to push and pull back and get a lot of knockback off the edge. maintaining the edge against the run. I think, there are some things fundamentally that could be unlocked with Dallas Turner at the next level too. I think there's still some raw components of his game, could add some more pass rushing moves, but someone's going to see that upside and the frame and everything that's there and probably pick him based on the projection in the top 15 for sure.
Another position that I think people have kind of slept on, and I don't know if slept on is the right term here, but the cornerback position. The Vikings have some questions there. They have Byron Murphy the second, or excuse me, Byron Murphy the second is the defensive tackle, right? And then we have Byron Murphy Jr., who's the corner.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. That's the reason I don't want Byron Murphy the second, because then I'd have to like differentiate with every article that I write. Murphy the second, Murphy Jr. There's also a Michael Penix thing that if you have autocorrect on your computer, you know exactly what I'm talking about because you have to do one last proofread there. But do find PEIN and tell me what you find out in your article. Anyway, back on topic here. The cornerback position. We've seen the Vikings linked to Quinion Mitchell, the Toledo cornerback, Cooper DeJean, Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry would be awesome just because of his name. I think it would be awesome to have a guy wearing purple named Kool-Aid. That would just fit in here. What do you think about this cornerback class?
Say Quinion Mitchell's in a tier by himself. I think he just moves differently. Played in a quarters and a quarter half structure defense, so more of a zone type of corner. But, he was skilled in the off man end zone principles. I just love how he can trigger on the ball. He's really explosive, moving from his zone drop and then reacting and getting into passing lanes. I think he's going to be a really good player. I think he's the main primary blue chip cornerback. And then I think you could see some variance in terms of people's opinions. I actually really like the group of cornerbacks outside of the guys that are getting a lot of the buzz right now. Max Melton at Rutgers, who I think can be a very good physical man type of corner at the next level. He's really fast. I evaluated him and was a lot higher on him than maybe I was anticipating. He's fluid. He's twitched up. Change of directions, really good. Quick feet, really mirrors receivers out of breaks. And I just thought he was very controlled and intentional, had good footwork. Elijah Jones is another player that I like out of Boston College, tested extremely well. Tough, dynamic man coverage type of corner. He's got excellent ball skills. He can lean and locate, has good body control on the deep balls, plays with good instincts. A little tenacity and physicality could help him maybe play a little bit in the slot if you wanted to, but I see him being another press man type of corner. Nehemiah Pritchett, I think it should be getting a little bit more buzz out of Auburn. I actually think that his acceleration, deceleration metrics, when you go look at the Senior Bowl stuff, was outstanding. He moves really well. I think he's very physical. His film jumps out where he's got this like feisty playing style that I think would fit the Vikings scheme quite well. And then I would say Cam Hart's another intriguing option, a long cornerback out of Notre Dame. And I was watching him and I thought that he did a very nice job against Marvin Harrison last season, played in a scheme that had a lot of cover one principles dashed in with cover two. He can really compress space, leaning and locating deep balls. And I think he's very physical, long arms to create challenges for receivers while in the press alignment. I think he's going to be someone that could potentially be picked a little bit higher than people think. So there are options outside of those big names. And then one more I'd add is Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia as well. There's some potential there.
Is there any position in this scenario that the Vikings should be considering? Maybe that's not on defense. Maybe do you think they need another receiver? Should they take an offensive lineman, maybe prepare for the future a little bit? Is there another position that if the Vikings say, okay, we're going to stay at 11, or maybe we're going to make a small trade down and accumulate some more capital to really fill out this roster, where should the Vikings be looking?
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario. I've thought long and hard about, okay, what is something that the Vikings don't necessarily have that could be a surprise that would be like, whoa, I didn't see that coming? Because I feel like the Vikings have kind of been that way with their drafts the past couple of years, where it's like the stuff that maybe you're hearing and speculating isn't exactly where they end up going. And based on losing KJ Osborne, I know this wide receiver class is pretty stacked, but I was honestly thinking outside the box with TJ Hawkinson's injury, him battling his way back. Do you pick like a unicorn type of player in Brock Bowers that you can move all over, line up everywhere, kind of the tweener between wide receiver and tight end, mismatch type of player, can put them all over. I like to call it the unicorn, which would be like what I would call the in my offensive system to build stuff around a player like that. I'm not saying that the Vikings are going to do it, but I've had some outside the box thoughts in my mind going, well, they spent the money on defense in free agency. Maybe they add another unexpected dynamic weapon on the offensive side. I also could see offensive line, like you mentioned as well, being able to fortify that. But I'm just thinking way outside the box in terms of the realm of possibility. But it kind of comes down to quarterback. Like, what are you going to do at quarterback? Do you have to trade up? Do you stay where you're at? That's going to shape the whole strategy.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of when people talk about this, that's their next question. What are the Vikings going to do at quarterback? In this scenario, I think Michael Penix Jr. is the target. If the Vikings don't trade up and that's their guy, is he a suitable enough solution? Or I should just say suitable, not suitable enough, but is he going to work in the Vikings offense with the talent that he has?
I think he's intriguing, certainly. When you go back and look at the progression of him, you see a processing improvement year over year, going all the way back to Indiana, which is where I originally had spent a lot of time watching him over the years, covering the Big Ten. He finds the matchup and he's going to get after it. He slings those balls into tight windows. He finds a matchup. He eviscerates it downfield. He does a very good job of avoiding sacks and pressures, though, by just intentionally moving around the pocket. You might not notice it. He's not like super dynamic in terms of like making people miss, and sometimes actually really struggles against pressure, but he can intentionally move around the pocket and kind of has that feel to buy a little extra time to get the ball out. He's not an elite play extender, but I think he deserves a little more credit for the way he can avoid the rush. And I think the numbers sort of support that. He knows how to attack leverage, certain coverage types. You go back to Indiana, you watch the progression to Washington. I think you'd be pretty fascinated. I like the fearless approach, attacking down the field. He does have some problems, though, against pressure and exotics, especially when facing interior rushes. And I think that's something he's going to have to overcome at the next level. I'd also like to see him vary some throw tempos a bit more based on route types, coverage types, and space. But the thing I like is he does throw that football just differently. The ball jumps out of his hands. He can really sling it. I think the processing improvement over the course of the years in college, I think that's something that has jumped out. And he certainly has the accuracy and the smarts to certainly handle the Vikings offensive scheme.
And I think from a talent standpoint too, like if you just looked at him, not knowing his injury history, not knowing any of that, you could look at him like from a PR's perspective. You know, the Vikings got rid of Kirk Cousins, and I think that was a PR hit to some of their fans, but everybody kind of moved on because there was this excitement about getting a quarterback. If they pull this strategy off, staying at 11 and taking Penix in the mid to late first round, is that going to be disappointing for Vikings fans who are looking forward to, hey, they're finally taking a swing on a quarterback for the first time since I've been a fan? Like, does it play into your mind a little bit when you think about Penix or no?
Here's what I'll say about it. I believe that you look at this whole quarterback class, there are strengths and weaknesses with each guy. And I think that can be said every single year. There are certain things from a college scheme standpoint, you're wondering, how is this player going to project when they get out of the structure of what they've been doing at the college level? And then it comes down to the fit, where I think the Vikings, in terms of what they have available for a quarterback coming in, head coach who calls the plays, stability, creativity in the play calling. You got weapons at your disposal with, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones out of the backfield now. Like there's a good supporting cast of people for this quarterback to come in. And so I think that the differentiating factor is the information that we don't have access to, where they're coming in on the whiteboard, they're going through specific scenarios, they're coming in a private workout, going through all the route types that they want to see for their specific offense. And those things will probably end up being the differentiating factor and the conversations that they have with personnel. I know I have a lot of relationships with college coaches all over the place, and they always tell me about how detailed these GMs, these coordinators, these head coaches, the scouts are. They'll call and go through a lot of stuff with the people who have worked closely with these guys because they want to know their process, some of the strengths and weaknesses that they see. They work with these guys on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's the challenge that some people face. They just look and they project and they watch the film. It's certainly important and very big factor, but there's also that information that we don't have access to that I think makes it difficult for outsiders to fully evaluate quarterback play.
Yeah, and I mean, again, when I look at Penix, I see a lot of good things. The guy's got a cannon. He moves around. He's a pocket passer, but he's not like a Kirk Cousins pocket passer, right? Where he's got deck anchors for feet and he can't move around or anything. He's got a bazooka for an arm. I might have mentioned that before, but I'll just throw that out there again. The biggest concerns that I have are medical history and the fact he won't turn 24 in May. But we've seen other teams like the 49ers, they take Brock Purdy and they elevate him. How good is that Viking structure to elevate any prospect that they take in the NFL draft?
Well, and that's just it. I think it comes down to, the court. That's what I've heard from a lot of people is like whoever Minnesota drafts is going to do quite well just because of the system that they're going in. And I've talked to people who have played in this league that like they always tell me that like you can end up in the worst situation possible and there's just nothing that you can do about it, where you don't have the right coach, you don't have the right system, you don't have the right receivers in your receiver room. Like a lot of times the player gets blamed, and there's certainly in many cases blame that should go on the player for just not being able to translate. There was a miss, but there's also times where that player was not put in the best situation to be successful. So I think, the Vikings are definitely attractive for the rookie quarterback who wants to play in this league because of what they have at their disposal. And, that's something that the Vikings are going to be able to assess better is when players are close, what factors elevate them behind closed doors in terms of leadership, football IQ, the ability to connect the team. I think those things are very important when you're looking for quarterbacks.
Now, if we're talking about quarterbacks at the top of the draft, it seems like there's more than smoke when it comes to Drake May. We saw Pete Prisco say that he was the Vikings' top target. Carmen Vitale of Fox Sports also said the same. And then Ben Gessling was on KFAN saying that the Vikings really like Drake May. He's got the connections to Sam Darnold and Josh McCown. Like it seems like there's an inferno blazing somewhere, but nobody can find it for another 3 weeks. So what do you think of Drake May as a prospect? And is it worth the Vikings to trade up for him?
I mean, there's certainly talent within his game. I do think there are flaws, though, that maybe don't get discussed a lot, where processing, handling pressure and disguises, being able to, basically navigate the pocket and not make poor decisions when the rush is coming in. I think his footwork can get muddy, especially versus pressure and when the pocket gets pinned. And then that negatively impacts the rhythm, the timing, his accuracy. It's sometimes a roller coaster ride watching him play quarterback over the course of games that you evaluate, because you see the flash where, he's rolling out and he makes a throw against the grain and drops it right in. I think he shines while throwing those deep crossers and work in the middle of the field. And, the ability to, basically put the ball in places where receivers can make a play. And that second off script play where he can scramble around and get things done. I think the fit is going to be very important here, where if he's in that wide zone play action type of offense where he can really showcase his arm strength, his downfield passing skills, the touch and arm strength to throw the ball at all three levels. I just think that like it's sometimes hard to evaluate May with the air raid system too, where you're reading space and grass. They're minimal. The concepts are pretty simplistic. They build off each other. There's a lot of repetition in that system that he played with Phil Longo in 2022. I actually thought his film in 22 was better than 23, but he got a new play caller in Chip Lindsey, which I also think complicates the evaluation as well. So it comes down to, do you feel like some of the things that you see, like from a processing, footwork standpoint, ability to throw against pressure, like can he overcome those things with better structure is I guess what I'm trying to say. There are flaws, but then there are flashes. So I think that's the risky proposition with a player like Drake May.
You know what I like about Drake May is North Carolina's uniforms, right? I mean, I see it on the tape. They obviously have the Tar Heel blue and the kind of dark blue ones, but then they got all the cool helmets. Like there's this navy blue chrome one, and then they have the silver one and all that stuff. Every time I watch his tape, obviously I'm looking for Drake May because I like his mobility. He reminds me a little bit of Ben Roethlisberger, where he's tough to bring down, kind of makes the play where you're like, hey man, you probably shouldn't flip that as you're, no look passing behind you. But I always love those uniforms. For any quarterback, let's say the Vikings like JJ McCarthy, how far should they be willing to go in order to trade in the top 5 to get their guy?
Yeah, I really like JJ McCarthy. I'm JJ McCarthy. If you're asking me to pick between JJ McCarthy and Drake May, I'm picking JJ McCarthy. I don't know what exactly, yeah, how much of the smoke here with JJ McCarthy is real, where it's like, is somebody actually going to take him in the top 5? I'm starting to think so. I do think that the NFL community is higher on Drake May maybe than the media was. And I think the media is starting to get caught up as the NFL starts to get the message out there about what he can do. I think his play fake's really good. It sucks defenders up. I love his elusiveness. He has very light feet. He's a great improv, off-schedule quarterback when he needs to be. He gives his receivers a lot of hand signals, redirecting, and just knows where to put the ball to give them a chance or draw a flag. I think about like those scramble plays with a guy like Justin Jefferson, just giving him a chance down the field. That off schedule element is very attractive to me. I think he flashes the ability to move defenders with his eyes and pump fakes, but really shines throwing over the middle of the field. Good anticipation in those instances, the crossers, the seam shots, and he really throws the ball with nice tempo and varies the pass pace as he needs to. You can really see some of the flashes of timing and field vision when you look at him closely. I think the biggest thing is throwing outside the numbers. I saw this when Minnesota played him, evaluating a ton of film, getting ready for the game, throwing to his left. He tends to open up a little bit at the top of the drop, which causes some accuracy problems. It's kind of noticeable when there's knockback on the edge too. So I see some things that he can get better on, like attack and leverage and with precise ball placement and, some of the things that will come with structure in an offense. Like I think there are things that maybe he wasn't asked to do at Michigan just based on their style of play that someone will ask him to do in the NFL and he'll be able to showcase his strengths. But when you look at sheer talent, ability, the flashes, the type of system he played in where the running game was important, he was able to take advantage of the throws that were available, working under center in the play action bootleg game, and then also having the ability to scramble and do what he needs to do with his legs. 27-1 as a starter at Michigan. The dude knows how to win games, and I know the supporting cast was really good, but still, you got to be able to bring the team together and display the leadership needed to get that done. And I thought JJ did that at Michigan. I think he's the guy that fits what Kevin O'Connell wants to do best.
You think, would you throw in 3 first rounders to get JJ McCarthy?
That's the hard part. I
Yeah.
mean, how you're gonna have to probably give up a lot to get up there. And that's the type of move that, like, hey, as a general manager, you're putting yourself out there. You're going, hey, this is the move, this is the time. I think eventually you have to do that. You have to put the chips in and take a chance. And I'm more willing to do that with a player who has a proven track record of winning, worked under Jim Harbaugh, who I think, has done a good job of just like putting his team in a position where it's kind of like an NFL system there, where they treat it like that. They get guys ready to translate up to the next level. And I'm just feeling like the fit overall, watching him in person too. I got a chance to see him. I think that's valuable to watch how a guy plays live. Even just warming up, all the things leading into the game. I was paying a lot of attention to him just because I thought maybe he would be a fit. And based on the film, watching him over the years, I think the Vikings, if they want to make a big splash and trade up, that's the guy I would do it for.
I don't know why I froze just there. I have no idea. I was thinking of two different things. Maybe I'm just in awe of the thought of JJ McCarthy being in a Vikings jersey, or just the awe of the Vikings taking a swing. Well, of course, to get that second first round pick that the Vikings were talking about, they had to trade their second round pick. And their second round pick was in the news today because Stefon Diggs, our old friend, has been traded to the Houston Texans. Diggs was traded for the 42nd overall pick in the draft. It's not looking like that Stefon Diggs for Justin Jefferson trade was a win-win after all. Does it?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that might be the case just based on Diggs getting to the point now where he's heading to another team, and Buffalo with the cap implications of that definitely tells you that they were looking to get rid of the potential issues that could have been going on there. I don't know. We'll never really know the exactly what happened, but he's going into a good situation with CJ Stroud now. I think adding another weapon for him is extremely valuable, and it's a good move by the Houston Texans. And Buffalo's looking at it from the standpoint of this receiver class is stacked. There's a lot of options. They don't even necessarily have to do it in round one, but I think they probably will. I've got my eyes on Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy as a couple potential targets if they want to go wide receiver in the back half of the first round at 28. So I think Buffalo knew that the wide receiver class was good. They had probably some other stuff going on behind the scenes that triggered the move.
Oh, you guys don't. Well, here's a couple of things because they're going to eat $31.1 million in dead cap with the trade. You know what that tells me? They wanted him to get the hell out of there. They were tired of Stefon Diggs with the whole, I need targets. Why aren't you throwing me the ball? The sideline outbursts and everything. And I like Stefon Diggs. I mean, I got a picture of Stefon Diggs on my wall back here. Mossing, I believe that's Jair Alexander. Might be. Who was the guy? There's somebody on the Packers. I had a friend who would always be like, yeah, but if you watch his hips, like the way his hips turn, he's just a shutdown guy. And I don't think he did anything in the NFL, or maybe he got hurt or something. But the Stefon Diggs trade is interesting to me because I think we're going to hear the TikTok community and everybody else start putting out, well, Justin Jefferson, Buffalo, he's my number one, top 5 outcomes for Justin Jefferson. He's going to Buffalo. We got to get him with Josh Allen. They're going to have him replace Stefon Diggs. Problem with that is that the Bills have $7 million in cap space right now. You could free up a little bit, maybe with a Jefferson extension or whatever. You got to pay him. In 2025, the Bills have $44,000 in cap space. Not 44 million, $44,000 in cap space. So before we get into that, I think we should just shut that down, huh?
Yeah, I believe the Vikings will end up getting something done very soon. It's just going to be now they're so focused on getting this quarterback situation figured out that that's like priority 1A, and trying to figure out how they're going to build the roster. And this is the most fascinating time of year because now, the Vikings get to potentially make that franchise altering decision. Like this is going to have ramifications for the next 5 to 10 years of Vikings football, the quarterback that they end up going with. So I'm like looking at all possible options that they could potentially, trade up. They could stay put. They could pick at 23. I mean, Bo Nix, is he an option? Like, I feel he's been not discussed at all. He's not been discussed at all. And I feel like there's a negative connotation in some respects of Bo Nix, but I also see the potential that, at the right pick slot, he could be someone that is an option.
I'd be more disappointed with Bo Nix than Michael Penix, and I would be disappointed with Michael Penix. I do see the good though in Penix. Like when you say that, everybody's like, well, he just threw it to his first or second read. Oh, so he can go through a couple progressions. So he's a two read. Maybe you can teach him to go through a third. So he knows how to run an offense. He doesn't get sacked and he doesn't turn the ball over. For some head coaches, that's like the dream. That's the type of quarterback you want. One that doesn't force the issue and doesn't make mistakes and just run the offense that you want. I think San Francisco might have one in Brock Purdy, who I think is a little bit better than that, but you could see it. I don't know, man. I mean, the negative connotations, they kind of weigh strong in my mind. And that would be one where I just feel like the Vikings would just kind of settle for what fell to them and wouldn't be that big swing we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, and they could take the big swing. They could also go that route too. I don't know. There's a lot of things that have to be figured out, but I do think that like there are some intriguing elements of Bo Nix's game, like the timing, he excelled within the structure of Oregon's offense, and I think that's the big question is like, can he take the next step while moving outside of that? But like accuracy, flashing that ability to layer in the throws. He's a good athlete. He can escape pressure, but he's good at playing within structure. He's smart. I think you saw the improvement over the course of his career. He dealt with a ton of offensive coordinator change, had a different coordinator every year. But I could see some appeal from NFL teams just throwing a dart and deciding, hey, Bo Nix has the smarts and the intangibles and the ability to play with timing, structure, and accuracy. Maybe there's something there.
Let's go from one Big Ten school to another, huh? Like Big Ten rivals, Oregon and Minnesota. It's going to take a while to get used to that, but I've been playing that on NCAA 14 for years now, so I think we're good. Gophers in the draft. Obviously, you spend a lot of your time with a Gopher football team. You do great work at Gophers Guru. Tyler Nuban, one of the top safeties in the draft. Some people thought he was a first-round pick coming into the season. Where do you think Nuban goes, and how bright is his future in the NFL?
Yeah, I see him going in the second round, high second round, possibly. The testing side of it, Nuban had knee surgery right before the bowl game. And so he's kind of working his way back. And I think that impacted some of the testing side of it. But, you just look at the body of work, program leader all time in interceptions, the instincts and versatility of his game. He's very smart. He has studied the game inside and out to learn exactly how coverages fit together, the route combinations he sees, how offensive coordinators attack certain coverage structures. And I think that's helped him develop very good instincts, ability to break and drive on the ball and get himself in spots to make plays. I think he's improved as a tackler and run defender over the years. He's took his lumps early in his career, getting playing time maybe before he was ready to, worked out all of that, improved, and then became a blue chip player for the Gophers. And I think that started with his preparation and the habits that he developed. Joe Rossi and the staff did an outstanding job. I mean, that's the thing. That defensive staff has produced a lot of very good NFL players recently. Antoine Winfield Jr., Benjamin St. Juste, Terrell Smith, Boye Mafe. Now you got a guy like Tyler Nuban, Blake Cashman with the Vikings now. Like, that defensive staff has done a very good job, and now Joe Rossi's at Michigan State, so Michigan State's probably going to get some NFL players developed out there too. So I think that you look at Nuban, it's probably second round based on that safety class. I don't think the safety class is as talented as it has been in the past either.
Brevin Ford is another name that has been tossed out as a potential pro prospect. Didn't see a ton of action. I know he had 42 catches 2 years ago, but his numbers went down last year. 6'7", 270, built like a house. Do you think there's more for him to produce at the NFL level?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because you look at Brevin in yards per route run was one of the best tight ends in the country the previous year. And then, you look at him, he, like you said, built so big. I mean, he was getting up there to like 275 because of the need for him to be able to do a lot of different things, to block, to play in line in Minnesota system. He had to be bigger and stronger. But now you look, he's cutting weight, he's getting down. They want, the NFL teams have said they want him to be a little bit more nimble and explosive because they see the athletic traits in the frame. So he's done that throughout the draft process. He's had interest from teams. I think his versatility is attractive because he is a very good run blocker. He can play in line, he can play detached, which allows you to get to a lot of different formations and put stress on the defense, whether you're in 11 or 12 personnel. So I think Brevin is someone that a team will like as a developmental prospect that maybe they're going, hey, in our system, we can showcase him in a different way and invest time in his development.
Is there any other Gopher in the draft or even on the current roster who's going to play in Dinkytown this year that you think would make a very good pro prospect in the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, I think the Gophers on the current roster right now, they have a lot of guys this next class that will be in the conversation of top 100. But I'd say right now, if you want a guy that is a sleeper player in this draft class, it's Kyler Baugh. His explosiveness profile, the defensive tackle position testing was outstanding. The broad and vertical jumps, he had 34 bench press reps, is very, very strong, was one of the strongest players on the team. I think that based on his pre-draft process and what he did at his pro day, NFL teams were definitely flocking to him after, based on what he was able to put up. And then, you watch his film, the guy plays with outstanding effort, is able to, chase plays laterally, moves well in that capacity, but also the strength to be able to generate knockback and push in the run game as well. So Kyler Baugh, I was not necessarily anticipating that explosiveness profile, but when you do watch the film, you do see a lot of flashes of potential, and he was a big part of Minnesota's defense the past couple of seasons.
How are you feeling about the Gophers right now? Because I think there's a lot of questions about sports in Dinkytown, so to speak. The NIL portal or the transfer portal is kind of out of control. NIL is kind of ransacked the Gopher basketball program right now. How are you feeling? I guess this is a football show. I'll ask you football specifically, but how are you feeling about the Gophers?
I just think that right now it's going to come down to player development. There were a lot of younger players that played big roles last season, especially when you got down to the bottom of the barrel at the linebacker position. I mean, you go to the Purdue game and you got a walk on and a true freshman out there playing on the road in the Big Ten, and that's just a challenge. You build your defensive scheme with the anticipation of who's going to be out there, and then you got younger players. They have a lot to process. They're drinking through the fire hose in a sense that, this game's moving so fast. There's so much that they have to do. So I felt like they were in sort of a transition spot there where they needed everybody to stay healthy in order for them to have success. And then Cody Lindenberg was hurt, and that really put a lot of stress on them. So I think the biggest challenge they have now is these guys that are like second, third, fourth on the depth chart at all these positions on defense have to take a huge step forward to give them better competitive depth on that side of the ball. I think their offensive line is strong. I think that that's maybe the best aspect of the roster right now. Max Brosmer comes in, your quarterback out of New Hampshire, just trying to get his bearings here. I think his experience level and some of the things he did conceptually are helping him get used to Minnesota's offense. But there are things that you have to, get used to. It's the speed of the game, how fast it is, all the weapons, getting chemistry with them. So that's what the priority is during spring ball. But I'd say the depth is the big thing, and then hanging on in the second window of the transfer portal. You got a second window coming on April 15th through April 30th. The teams that lose players in this second window, and Minnesota experienced it last year, it can be very detrimental to your success because it hurts depth, and then you got to try to get options in here that didn't get spring ball. So those are the few things that I'm watching for as I'm around there this spring.
And it's a really unenvious situation, I think, in college sports, unless you coach like Alabama or something. You know what I mean? Like The transfer portal is so wonky right now that, there's the Alabama kid who transferred to Iowa. He just got a big ass check and he went back to Alabama to go enroll in school there again. For a coach like PJ Fleck, and understandably, he has gotten some flack. Flack, some criticism, we'll call it that, about some of his decision making last year. But at the same time, he does have a point when he talks about these kids, because a lot of people make big news out of that NIL, right? How, well, there's 18 Fortune 500 companies in Minneapolis. Well, first of all, they have a lot of choices to spend their money on in the Twin Cities market. A market like Madison, for example, there's only one horse that you could throw your money on in Madison. It's the Wisconsin Badgers, right? But when you don't have those NIL funds, and they're working on it, I mean, it's not like they're completely oblivious to the problem, but when you have limited funds, it kind of turns into like Major League Baseball, where a team like the Yankees, who has this massive bankroll, can go out and they can throw money all over the place. And a team like the Twins, they have to be kind of cost conscious. For Fleck, it's, yeah, he can recruit well. He's done well in the recruiting process the last several years to put a good team on the field. The problem is he can't seem to make them stay, because somebody from a big school is going to come up with a wad of cash and take those players away. Like I said, basketball is a really good example too, because Ben Johnson spends the last 3 years developing a core that could have been a top 25 team last year. And then Farrell Payne transfers, Braden Carrington transfers. I think Josh Ola Joseph transferred. Like it's a really rough situation, just not just in football, but in college sports all around.
Yeah, I think Minnesota's player retention was solid this offseason. Only lost Ethan Kellick-Manis as a starter. At this point, I mean, the spring transfer window is opening soon, but you look at what they're able to do on the football side with Dinkytown athletes and NIL, I think there's been some progress made there. Obviously, there's still work to be done, but I think it's going to come down to being creative with how you build the roster, how you promote depth within your team, using the transfer portal, finding the right guys at every level, dipping into the FCS when you need to, knowing where to put your resources, gaining edges wherever you can in terms of player evaluation and adding players that are going to help you win. I think basketball is a little bit different. I don't think you can compare basketball and football very much, because basketball is more of a transfer portal world. The roster sizes are smaller. That you watch the NCAA tournament, you see a lot of these rosters and starting lineups are built up of transfers, especially from the mid-major level that come up. And that's just the formula of where that's going. And especially when you're in the middle of the pack Big Ten school, you're going to face more turnover. But then it's all about, you got to be very good at finding the gems to fill out your roster. And if you hit on those, then you can have success. It's just now these teams have to really invest in roster building, creativity, finding all of the ways that they can get an edge in roster building. I think that it's not always just about NIL. It's about the ability to identify talent and be creative while doing so.
Is the best way to solve this by winning? Because I look at it this way. Here's what I would say. Like, if I'm Best Buy and I have this NIL budget, do I want to spend my money on Ethan Kellick-Manis, or do I want to spend it on Caleb Williams over at USC?
Like, yeah, and I mean, that's a factor. It comes down to consistency of the program. I think, this market is different than other markets too. You mentioned like Madison being the only wheel, where the Twin Cities, you have more competition within the market in the sports world. And that certainly plays into it. But I also think that like there is opportunity in terms of, getting players to come to Minnesota and having the NIL to do it. I think it's just going to be about getting caught up in a lot of facets in terms of like where the game is going, being nimble, being adaptive, because every day this thing changes. I don't think anybody's got the answers to the equation. There's obviously programs that are at an advantage because of the sustained success that they have. I think basketball maybe sometimes experiences that the most, because these kids want to play in the NCAA tournament and they're looking at the programs that have consistently got there. And if they have an offer to go play for one of those teams, they may be more willing to do that if, the NIL is also there.
So, as you may have deterred, Daniel knows his stuff surrounding the Gophers, Gopher football, Gopher basketball. You can read about it all at Gophers Guru. What you got going on over there, Daniel?
Oh, there's a lot of different things right now. Spring ball, I'll have some content on that. Talked with offensive assistants this week, so there'll be some content filtering out on that. And then keep your eyes out on Twitter. I'll be putting out some NFL draft stuff. I've been really digging into kind of overlaps, all the college projects that I do and the things with that. I kind of build in evaluating prospects with that. So I'll definitely be putting out some stuff on Twitter at Daniel House MN, so you can check me out and see some of my draft stuff too.
Well, don't forget to follow me as well at the Real Schad. I've been putting out some stuff as well, some social media videos and some very aggressive Minnesota Wild takes. If you're a hockey fan, I don't know. Half the fan base hates me right now, but I don't really care. But Daniel, thank you for coming on. It's all the time we have for the Viking Age podcast today. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in Apple and Spotify the very next day if you're looking for us in podcast form. But however you consume us, make sure you rate, comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. For Daniel House, I am Chris Schad. This has been the Viking Age Podcast.